And one of the things that has changed biology is that things like sequencing are actually accelerating faster. So we can now read the genomes of organisms faster and cheaper, and that the rate is going up and the cost is going down, down, down. So we're starting to understand biology at a deeper level because we can see into the genomics. And now we have technologies like CRISPR that have gone on top of many other previous gene editing tech. So we can be putting in editing with genomes, seeing what effect it has, putting in new functions into organisms, all these things that we just couldn't do 10 years ago at a rate that was allowing researchers to test many hypotheses over the course of their career, and also at a scale that it could be global and every lab could do it basically.
Yeah. Walk us through sequencing itself. So if I give a saliva sample, how do they actually sequence it?
So I'm not an expert in the nitty-gritty of it. So there's right now a few different technologies like ion torrent and Illumina sequencing, which is by far the leader in the space.
Yeah.
So these guys have machines all over the world, and you're sending samples to them, and they're sending you these large data sets that we can now process using machine learning. So I think using machine learning and applying that to these huge data sets is what's really going to be transformative, because we can understand the genetic sequence of many organisms and be comparing it, contrasting, and actually seeing how that genotype is relating to phenotype, which is the function that we see in the world, the expression.
Yeah. Actually, that's really important, how genotype and phenotype are related, how it actually expresses itself into the world. Because there are very similar ways that genes express themselves into the world, and then there are also different ways that they express themselves into the world based on their environments.
Yeah, epigenetics, exactly.
Epigenetics.
And one of the things, there's a big talk about doing gene editing in humans. It's like a very controversial subject.
Yeah.
And it's happening in certain diseases where it's a very simple, one mutation is leading to one disease. But as we start to understand the complexity,
isn't like sickle cell anemias?
That's one example.
That's one gene that's causing the mutation.
And the red blood cells.
In the red blood cells.
Exactly. Cystic fibrosis is another example. There's actually a company that went through Indy that's working on FAP, which is an inherited disease in the gut that leads to colon cancer, and essentially everyone who has it. So one mutation, you can do a very simple swap and edit. But then what's really going to be transformative is when we can start to understand how many, many different genes interact with each other to do much more complex things in the human body. So it's not just one mutation, one disease, but many interwoven things in our genetics that are causing some sort of feature in a human or organism.
That will be more difficult for sure when there's multiple genes that are being expressed that are causing the mutations, and then we have to try and solve that or figure that out. Okay, so that was a little bit on sequencing. Maybe we touch a bit on technologies like CRISPR-Cas9, and then we'll dive into a lot of the different uses and companies. So yeah, tell us a little bit about this. Was it last year? Or was it 2016 that
the first discovery?
Yeah.
I think it's actually a couple more years than that.
Okay.
It's been, I think Jennifer Doudna and her lab published a few really seminal papers around 2014, 2015. So maybe a little over 2 years, though the research has been kind of building to get to a tipping point, I think. But it's not the first gene editing technology we've had. I think just the how fine the accuracy of it is something that we hadn't quite seen before, and the cost. It's actually really economical and can be done. These proteins and reagents are very simple, so it can be done in basically any lab. You don't have to just be an MIT, Harvard, Berkeley level budget to do so. But
it's so huge.
Yeah, it's a really big deal because you have great scientists all over the world who've long been constrained by tools who that constraint is kind of coming off.
And they have all these hypotheses that they want to test.
Yeah, all the creativity is coming out into the world. I think that's something science is a very creative outlet, so to speak. So, people, going back to what I said before, in previous years, the life of a scientist, the number of hypotheses you could test in, say, a 40-year career was much more limited than it is now. So if you give a scientist 10x or more the opportunity to learn and test, the body of knowledge grows so quickly.
It'd be like once we get to the point where we can get into space faster and test all the different space hypotheses as well. That will be also a very exciting time. Same thing about the brain and oh man, it's a crucial, equip scientists with the tools that enables them to test hypotheses faster.
Yeah.
Okay,
Really,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, the tools part is really overlooked because it's kind of the least sexy part of investing, and people want to talk about lab-grown meat and things like that, which are really exciting, but the fundamental tools that we need to accelerate are oftentimes not as talked about and not as exciting, but really transformative. Actually.
Yeah, that's a huge takeaway. We need to hone in on providing artists and scientists and creators with these tools that enable them to tinker. And that's we're actually going to have Josiah Zahner on later, who's big into being kind of a guinea pig for genetic engineering on himself. And so and he has a whole kit via the Odin. Tons of kits. So that's exactly the tools that are needed, and investing into that's not as sexy as what's actually quickly applicable to people's lives. So okay, so let's talk about CRISPR-Cas9. Let's talk about what exactly occurs to the sequence. Let's say we see a mutation for sickle cell anemia. Is there a way, or cystic fibrosis, is there a way to we're equipping the protein with the code to be able to go and snap that out and replace it?
So it's not doing the replacing, it's doing the cutting function, and then when you put a bunch of strands of the DNA in it, when the DNA starts transiently being repaired, those new strands of the healthy gene will be integrated into the genome. So the CRISPR-Cas9
does the cutting
has a guide RNA, to match it, exactly.
To match it.
And then it cuts it to leave that new place open for healthy DNA.
And the healthy DNA just comes naturally from the body?
Most of the time we'll be adding that as well. So if the body has an inherent mutation, if you add the DNA in along with the CRISPR-Cas9, it can then work itself into the new DNA.
Okay, cool.
Essentially.
Cool. So the CRISPR-Cas9 is about the cutting at the right place.
Yeah.
The guide RNA.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right. So you guys have worked, so this is understanding the code of life. Now you're at 81 companies that you guys have accelerated into this world over 3 years. I've had the amazing opportunity to work with a couple of them. It's been so fun. It's like really helping scientists understand, business and bringing their products and services to the world. And that's an amazing thing that is really important and empowering to do. So, I mean, you guys range across so many subjects, and we have a huge list to go through, but let's start with you talking about some of the favorites.
Ooh, that's always a tough one.
They're going to watch
always
and be
a tough
like,
one.
Alex, which favorites did you say?
It's easy to go to some of the recent ones that have been in the press a lot. Memphis Meats is one that comes to mind very easily because they're in the news probably more than any other biotech company. Growing chicken, beef, pork, and duck in the lab using stem cells, and recently invested in by Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Cargill, Tyson, DFJ, a lot of these big names. So I think for them, it's really exciting because it's transformational in the food space, which particularly in America with factory farming has been getting a lot of attention, a lot of press, the ethics, the environmental concerns, the health concerns for individuals. So that's a really big deal. And how do we transform an entire industry that has a lot of momentum going for it?
We just had Stu Zimmerman on the vodcast who was speaking about how it's a caterpillar that's turning into a butterfly right now. The food industry has all these like Coca-Colas and McDonald's and stuff like that. That's about to evolve into the butterfly of what biotech can help provide us with. So, okay, so there's actually, you guys have a ridiculous amount of clean meat, clean dairy, clean egg companies and under your belt. So let's walk through this just a little bit more. So how, rather than raising a chicken and feeding it corn or grass-fed, however it ends up being fed, and being maybe locked up into smaller compartments and being filled with growth hormones that accelerate its growth, and then going through the whole slaughtering process and packaging process and shipping to the center, and then you going and buying it from the grocery store. Now it's taking a feather from the chicken and then being able to use the stem cell from the chicken's feather to, is it a collagen matrix? And then how does the stem cell turn into a chicken breast?
So, we're looking at muscle biopsies of these different animals, finding really healthy cells that are in just some sort of muscle tissue.
Got it.
Then whether it's also another company that does fish called Finless Foods, or Memphis Meats doing it for these animals, we're putting it in cell culture. So we're putting cells and giving them all the nutrients and the space they need to divide and flourish.
What are the nutrients that they need?
So there is what's been used right now as one of the big drivers in the growth media, along with the sugars and other things like that, is a fetal bovine growth serum.
Fetal bovine growth serum.
Yeah, so that's still an animal product, and what will eventually be a completely non-animal process. So
and that means fetal, like fetus, right?
From like baby cows, essentially. It's a very expensive thing.
Interesting.
And most of the companies are now moving beyond doing that. So having other completely non-animal related additives to the growth media. So it's giving them all the nutrients as well as the signaling to divide.
Got it.
So this is one of the big challenges.
Yeah.
Actually getting that cost down, because it's very expensive because they only have very small amounts. So that's one of the big challenges. And the other one is actually creating structure.
Yeah.
So it's easy. In the early iterations, how Memphis Meats got famous was actually a meatball. So it's a bunch of the cells, you put them together with some fat, then you can cook it, taste, look like a meatball. But making a chicken or a duck breast has the added challenge of the fibers, which is where these companies are right now working and making progress on.
Oh, got it. The fiber is what's more difficult than making the meatball itself. Okay.
Yeah, so you're giving the cells structure to grow in around.
Yeah. Okay, so one part of it is doing the cell agriculture, where you provide the nutrients that the cell needs to divide and replicate and make more. And then the other part is the structuring of what that actually ends up looking like. And okay, so you listed Memphis Meats, Finless Foods. So we got we're working in the fish and the oceans as well, and making sure that we don't that we do use a biotechnology for growing fish as food. Then we have Clara Foods as well. You want to talk about them maybe a bit?
Sure. They're a slightly different model. So they're making egg whites without the chicken. So no eggs, having to extract the egg whites, which is a really, really water inefficient process. Arturo, their CEO, I recently found out from him it's 2,000 liters of water to get a carton of eggs, which is incredible.
Damn.
Yeah, really incredible. So what these guys are doing is a little bit different than those other companies. There's a number of vital proteins that make up an egg white to give it the protein concentration, the texture, the look, the feel. And they're taking the genes that encode those proteins and putting them in yeast. And they brew them in what essentially looks like a microbrewery, in these large fermenters. Then you get the proteins out, and you can add them together and recreate an egg white. And what's interesting is there are individual proteins that have a ton of applications in food. And there are also, when you can adjust the ratio of proteins, you could get an egg white with the higher protein content, or that maybe is slightly better for bakery applications because it fluffs a little bit better, gives a better texture.
Wow. Yeah, you can start being in control of the concentration of the actual egg white that enables different uses.
Exactly. So rather than taking the whole egg and saying we want these vital proteins and then throwing out the rest, which is a really wasteful, inefficient process, we're just creating exactly what we want and designing basically our food and biology.
Yes. What are some of the other clean meat, clean egg, clean dairy, the ones that you want to share, and then we'll move on, if any?
In the general food space, similar to these guys, Geltor is a really exciting company. They're engineering bacteria to make different proteins, starting with collagen. And collagen is one that it's in a ton of foods. We don't really think about how we get it, but it's basically the remnants of animals being put in acid baths, and then the collagen kind of in some way melts off of their tissue, and then we scoop that out to make this protein. Really, not a process you want to actually look at. So they're able to basically, again, put the genes that encode this protein into bacteria, and similarly using big fermenters, basically brew collagen, so to speak.
Wow.
And they can also, make customized types of collagen for different texturing effects. Maybe take a collagen that's very rare and hard to find in nature, which then increases the price and makes it very scarce in products and foods, and make it at a much more stable supply chain and much higher purity as well. So cosmetics, research and development, food, all these applications. So we use collagen for many, many things.
It's interesting how for Geltor, bacteria is being used for the fermentation, and then for Clara Foods, yeast is being used for the fermentation. How do you pick between those for the fermentation process?
So there's some nuance to it. For Geltor, for example, it actually came out of 2 scientists out of Princeton. They were doing their research on the certain strain of bacteria, and they found really interesting switches that would shift the focus of energy from division to protein production. So rather than putting 90% of their energy into making multiple cells, they're putting 90% of their energy into making this protein. So they actually had certain strains that they'd been working on for years and years that they knew how to tinker with the genetics to make it more energy efficient. Whereas for the yeast, it was a matter of transforming them and finding them to be a good vector to express the protein. So it was a bit of expertise as well from the founders.
Okay, that's a good breadth of clean meat, clean dairy, clean egg. That's awesome. And it's so applicable to our lives. It's right away something that we do 3 times a day usually that is impacting so many animals across the world and people that eat across the world. It's going to be something that's right around the corner. I mean, that one's super soon, being able to sustainably feed the world cheap protein, clean meat. Paul Shapiro's book Clean Meat's really good. He's
amazing.
He's about to be on as well. He'll be around March, I think 5th it is, but
he's a great guy.
He's so good.
Love Paul.
Yeah, exactly. You guys should have him at Indy Bio too.
We've met him a couple times actually.
Yeah.
Geltor, did you see the announcement they had? They actually, using that collagen, they made an animal-free leather binding for one of his copies of his book.
Because that was Geltor that did that. Because he posted that, and I really liked that. That was Geltor.
Yeah, and they auctioned it for charity.
Exactly. Okay, now that you bring that up, we totally need to talk about this as well. So we're talking about using a different mediums, for example, mushrooms, mycelium, to grow structural materials, potentially actual materials for housing, or potentially materials like leathers. So walk us down that.
Yeah, so MycoWorks is an amazing company. Phil Ross, the CEO, and I think one of the inventors of this whole methodology of making myco textures and leather and construction material. But what's amazing about them is they're taking agricultural waste products, so things that farmers are paying people to take away or not knowing what to do with, and they're putting the spores of the mushroom in, and they can bind all these things together, and then they're giving it different textures, different thicknesses and properties. So, Phil, I believe, has made furniture and construction materials, but
it's amazing.
Found that leather is this huge industry, again involving a lot of animal throughput to get this material that we use for so many different goods, and also the time and energy and resources. I think it takes roughly 3 years to grow a cow to the size that we're harvesting the hides from. Last I talked to them, it was 2 weeks to grow an equivalent amount of this mushroom leather, which is amazing.
Huge difference.
Huge. And it's an eco-friendly process. You can close loop. So at the end you have agricultural waste and mushrooms, which are things that
exactly
don't stick around for a million years, like styrofoam or something. And they can put different textures in, different colors. It has the look, the feel of leather. So it's like recreating it, if not making it even better.
I remember first getting my hands on the MycoWorks leather, and I just was mind was blown because I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so cool to be at that moment of whoa, it's already here in my hands. And it's because of brilliant people working together and coming up with these ways to leverage biology and design. So yeah, that one seems like it's also right around the corner in terms of impacting people, because we purchase things that have leather and we use structural materials all the time. Okay, so I'm glad that you brought that one up. That's a really important one. Okay, so maybe we touch on catalog next. This is really interesting. We have so many servers and data centers that are just constantly churning out electricity and all the equipment that's actually being used to house all that data. And now we can store, we've been trying to figure this out, how to efficiently do it, but storing the digital zeros and ones in A's, T's, C's, and G's, and then being able to have like just a little tiny bit of is it what DNA in the form of in the form of what?
So it's I think the term is it's dehydrated and lyophilized down, so it can store for longer. You put it in like a -80 freezer, essentially.
Oh, okay.
So Catalog, it's a great company to bring up because it's not thought of this way, but it's, in a sense, it's a biomaterials company. We're replacing silicon and hard drives with DNA, this material that's in all of us, and is a key part of life, and making it vastly more efficient. DNA, I think, is a million times more data dense than any technologies we have now.
Crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Like you said, it fits into this tiny test tube. It's basically free to replicate using PCR, a pretty standard technique in the lab. And it lasts for tens to hundreds of thousands of years that we know of. And we've recovered DNA from animals who are frozen in Siberia, for example, that are have long been gone. So rather than building these huge server farms, essentially, sometimes on the side of a mountain, that we have to replace each server every 20, 30 years because they wear out. You have DNA, you make as many copies as you like, essentially, and put it in a freezer. And you can put that huge data server into 1, 2, 3 test tubes. Yeah. Essentially.
Put the whole Library of Congress into a couple test tubes and freeze that up and keep that and be able to. What is the actual liquid that's in the test tube, or what is the DNA that's in the test tube?
So it's DNA that's been encoded. If you think of ATCG,
but like, what is the actual liquid? What's the molecules? What is that? What is the?
So you have DNA that's been, I think, the exact process I'm not 100% sure on, but I think it's been dehydrated down to a more stable form that can then be frozen. So
okay, so it's actual just DNA. It's not like coding something else with.
So they encode it and then they go through the process of putting it into storage. Okay. So they encode it under normal conditions, and they're working on different techniques to make it more scalable and more efficient.
Yeah.
Because right now, while they're at Indy Bio, they encoded 1 megabyte of information, but to do a terabyte, gigabyte, or petabyte, you need automation that can go at a very large scale.
Yeah.
Because we're creating so much information right now in the world.
Yeah.
At a rate,
so big.
Yeah.
It's like in the last 2 years, there's been, I believe, 90% of all data has been created in the last 2 years, and that just keeps happening year after year.
That's what, the trend is something along those lines, which is, and from what I understand, we are actually going to run out of silicon in 20, 30, 40 years at the rate that we're using it to build these electronic devices.
Think about, we started the vodcast, and think about how much space this takes up with YouTube. Yeah.
So exactly. Looking at long-term storage first, this data that we don't have to, read every other day or every month, but something that companies are backing up their information with, that they're required to do, for 20, 30 years or longer. This is, a very safe way to do that. Yeah. And starting with that kind of long game first, and then probably finding other methods to do shorter-term storage.
Yeah. And this also reminds me of the seed vault in Norway as well.
I don't know much about that.
They just put another, I think, $13 million into the seed vault, which is, I think, in the side of a large mountain, or it's underground, one of those two, but they are taking seeds from around the world and storing them in the seed vault just in case of something.
Okay.
Yeah. And I am thinking that this is probably a pretty good idea in the whole just in case idea of things, especially to be able to quickly revitalize and restart humanity in the drastic case that something does happen. But it kind of reminds me of that, because you can do the same thing with DNA. So it's dehydrated DNA inside of the test tubes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. What you mentioned, it made me think of the Long Now Foundation.
Yes.
It's one of those amazing organizations that's thinking about the long term of keeping a record of every language that humanity has. So more and more people, I'm really inspired to see people thinking long term and thinking about how do we keep the richness of life and diversity, keep records of it.
Yes, yes. It's something crazy like there have been 100 million species on the planet, but only 10 million are left.
Really?
So 90 million species have died.
Have come and gone.
Have come and gone, yeah. Come and gone, yeah.
Yeah, I'd imagine most of those are probably microorganisms that we never would have even known.
Yeah. And I think long now is also really interesting, because when do we ever think about things past the length of a human lifetime? It's really important to do so. Similar to how we view things, and this is also really important for Indy Bio, and maybe to something that we can help the new batches that come into the accelerator understand. But as much as they're thinking down at the level of the molecules and the DNA and the cells, that's amazing to be able to understand that level, that really small level. And then there's the really huge level of like the cosmos and even our solar system, right? So there's that level of massiveness, 93 million miles to the star, things like that. And then there's like kind of like the in-between, which is the human.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in between those two things. And so just being able to like run that story by people to get them like, yes, the small is really important, the massive is really important, and so are us at this level, but we got to kind of at least understand these other two, massive and small. And then that also that reminds me of the long now, of the 10,000 year thing, because we have to both know about the the past of civilization and the present moment that we live in. And we just had Stu Zimmerman on. He was talking about smilage, and that like raises your vibes, which is smilage, just like smile more often and you'll feel better. And you'll help others feel better just by smiling and stuff like that. So that really helps the present moment. And then also thinking past the 100-year life expectancy of this body. What's society going to be like in 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years? And then that whole like 10,000 year clock's like, we probably shouldn't be using the finite resources on this planet because it's going to fucking run out. Just things like that. And so it really helps us waken, and they're right here in San Francisco as well.
And thinking along the finite resources, a lot of things we think are renewable in a sense for our lifetime aren't. So one is old growth trees. Like most large trees take hundreds of years, if not longer. We have this amazing company right now actually called Lingrove, which is using getting rid of trees, using flax linen and a bioresin to make wood composites for sporting goods, musical instruments, scaling to construction and furniture, paneling for cars. Places where people want wood, they love the feel, the aesthetic, because it's very human and natural. But we don't have that material anymore. We've cut down so much of these resources, thinking that I can plant a tree and it'll be back. But it's for us, for our lifetime, it's not that way actually.
For those massive ones, it takes 100 years to grow that out. So you're, interestingly enough, you pointed at not only like the aesthetics of wood, but you pointed at kind of like the daily uses of the, like even like a baseball bat or a cricket bat or something like that is even made of wood. So what did you say? It was flax linen?
The linen. So we grow tons of flax seeds, like in Europe and Canada.
Is it efficient to grow flax seeds?
Yeah, relative to tree, it's actually quite efficient. We mostly harvest for the seeds as opposed to the linen and the structure of it. So we have all this material that can be used for something else if you just think of new processes to use it. And with the composites this company's been able to make, the stiffness to weight ratio, which is why a tree can be so skinny but so tall, is as good, if not better, than many trees. So it has performance.
Superiority as well.
Essentially, yeah. So when you're making an arrow or a paddleboard, it both looks great, but also performs the way you need it to.
Oh, that's so interesting. What's the company called again?
Lingrove.
Lingrove.
Yeah.
Lingrove. Cool. That's a good one. That's a good one. I love where all these minds are just coming from, like just thinking about sustainability and the future, and just I don't think I could have I'd have to get into biology and get into sustainability for such a long period of time to come up with one of these moments, these eureka moments, for me to go into a field and solve something like that. Ron, I have a question for you.
Yeah, what?
Would you eat a burger that's clean meat that's grown from cell agriculture?
I'm still on the egg whites without the egg. To be honest with you, I'd like to give that a go first.
Yeah, it's a good one, huh?
Sure.
2,000 liters of water for 12 of them, 12 eggs. Oh.
I am interested in altering my diet so that I don't eat living animals.
Yeah, I feel like people that care about animals, care about the world, kind of are at least interested in trying and figuring that part out. So you would give it the egg whites a go to start, and
Well, yes.
yeah, me
I
too.
saw a video of what they do with all the male chicks. They grind them up. When they're making eggs, they just grind them up. They're of no use to the egg industry. And I was asked, what can you do about this? And my only answer was, stop eating eggs.
Yeah.
Me, personally, that's all I can do.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess even sustainably speaking, we can have grass-fed pastures of chickens that are not, but we're still eating their eggs. But interesting to hear, Ron, and I'd be interested to hear so many other, you guys at home, just chime on in. Let us know what you think. Would you eat clean meat that's grown from cells? Whether it's beef or chicken or eggs or dairy or whatever, would you? We'd love to hear about it, and maybe if you've had an experience with it already, even further, talk about it. Why would you? Why would you not? So yeah, we've covered so much. Would you purchase leather that's grown from mushrooms, or would you purchase structural material that's grown from mushrooms? Yeah, there's so much storing the digital data in DNA. We've covered a lot.
So one thing I do want to add to that around what can I do? What can the individual do? I think there's a lot of polarity. People think, well, I do my thing, or I go all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And really, these big companies are getting involved in the Memphis Meats of the world, the Clara Foods of the world, the plant-based food companies like Notco, because they see consumers are. Some people are going cold turkey. Yeah. Others are saying, well, I'm going to cut down by 50%.
Yeah.
And that is a very conscious, very impactful choice.
Exactly.
When it's done at scale.
Yeah. That's Alex and I have definitely been doing that. Just being not especially carnivorous, as a decently put way to say it. So you mentioned like Cargill and Tyson. They're going deep into they're investing, and it's a big deal. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Maybe we should talk about this. Konaku.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about this. What's his name?
Osh. Osh is the founder.
Osh, such a cool guy.
Yeah, amazing.
And so what is this neurobiology mixed with synthetic technology and silicon, and what is this? How do neuron-coded chips? Yeah. What
so
is this?
I mean, the vision is, I'll admit, even beyond my expertise in many ways. It's really out there. But basically, if we think about our brains and these vast neural networks, they're supercomputers. When you use them to the full extent, they're able to do things that even our best technology can't. So right now we're using silicon to do computation. Nick Konaku is aiming to change the paradigm to using biology, our neurons, to do so. So they're taking neurons and stabilizing them on a chip, making an environment outside of the body where they can survive, and then training them to do different functions.
Whoa.
So right now, an early function is to basically train them to be like a nose to detect things in the air, volatile compounds. There are these G protein coupled receptors, GPCR is what they're called, in our noses, in a dog's nose, for example, that are picking up molecules in the air that is causing odor. And we have this big library of knowledge, and you can train these neurons that are on a chip to express different receptors for different functions. So you could imagine, instead of a dog doing bomb sniffing, you train basically a chip that has neurons and something to read the signal off of the neurons, and then it goes Bluetooth to a central database to be able to detect explosives.
Yeah.
So one of the demos he did, I think roughly 2 years ago, when he finished Indy Bio, was putting this nose essentially on a drone, and it would go up a chemical gradient in the air to hover above a landmine.
Oh, wow.
So rather than people going out there, you have this drone that can detect parts per million in the air of a chemical explosive.
Wow.
Or for healthcare purposes, people who have type 1 diabetes, there's a really dangerous condition called ketoacidosis, which you can detect through fruity breath, is oftentimes an early way of knowing it. But even before it's detectable to our nose, there are a few different compounds in the air that, if you have a very sensitive monitor, could detect that. So that's one example in healthcare. And there's theories around other disease you can sense pretty early.
Whoa.
And that is just step number one.
Yeah.
This is with a small amount of neurons wired together. The greater amount of neurons you get, the more complexity you can have them do.
Is this with like 100 neurons or 1,000 neurons, or how much is this first step with?
The first step is under 100.
Under 100. Because you listed the sensing of parts per million of chemicals, or for landmines, or maybe for this actually reminds me of Ray, who worked
from BioInspira.
Yeah, I loved working with him. He's such a good guy. But that reminds me of a lot of that, which is, again, being able to detect a very small amount of a gas leak occurring for a company like PG&E. So interesting. So what animal do we take neurons from? What nervous system do we take them from to put it on a chip?
I think it depends. So I know dogs are one easy example. From what I understand, these are large libraries. We express these, dogs will express them. I think the concentrations that they are expressed at is different, and the sensitivity is different. So is how you train the neurons and the receptors. So I'm not sure if those are a matter of, these are dog ones versus human ones, though I imagine there is some picking and choosing, but it depends on what you're going for. We can probably detect certain things just much less sensitively than dogs, and maybe that's due to the sensitivity of the receptors, but also could be the amount that we have as well.
And then the neurons work on silicon. They work on a chip. They work cohesively as one unit.
Yeah, so you're putting it in, and a lot of it is around the discovery that they've made to put it in these conditions and keep it the right pH, the right nutrients, the right environment, basically.
How do they stay alive? Yeah.
There's a limited time frame, but it's not indefinite. But even keeping 2 months is quite a technical achievement.
And soon to be 1,000 or 1,000,000, 100 million.
Once you get there, I don't even have any idea what the applications start.
It could. So then it would basically be like taking and making a human brain in that environment, and then being able to use a human brain for computational power.
That's the vision. I think at the high end, it's an unanswered question of how do you, if you put 1 million neurons wired together, what is a training mechanism to do more complex tasks, like a self-driving car? So you get 1,000 neurons together. Is that enough to train it in some way to detect the environment?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's not a question that I think we have answered yet. There's a lot of unexplored frontiers here of what we can leverage all this power to do.
And as we go and get to that point, we can then figure out how many exact neurons it takes to do these different processing. So interesting. Okay, because is it 86 billion neurons in the brain?
Is that the number?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Because I wonder how many then would need to be used for these complex tasks or even simple ones. What is it, Ryan Bethencourt taught me that there's like 10 or something, or 40 neurons in a fly, something really small, right? Something.
Oh, the density? Yeah, I don't know the exact number. It's much smaller. These, and they're doing really complex tasks.
Yeah.
Detecting, sensing the environment.
Exactly.
So there's still a lot to be explored around how do these neurons do all these functions? How do we train them?
I can't believe something with that small of an amount of neurons can do so many of the crazy things that a fly does.
And react to the environment in such a dynamic way.
Yeah. Okay, so gosh, Konaku's so cool. It'd be good to get Osh on. All right, so I actually saw this one on your profile recently, Synthex. Is that how you say it? Synthex?
Yeah.
Synthex, yeah. So what are we talking about with targeted therapeutics? What does this mean? You come from a pharmacy background, so you can give us a good understanding of this as well. Yeah.
So it's changing a paradigm of where the drugs are working. So right now, oftentimes most drugs, with some exception, are small molecules. So these very small, precise molecules that fit into a binding pocket on a much larger structure called a protein. But proteins also interact in a huge number of ways that a tiny molecule can't block these large structures from touching each other. So Synthex is working on a class of therapeutic called peptides, which are these much larger interfaces that if you have these two proteins coming together, it can go in and block them from ever actually being able to function. And there's a lot of pathways in cancer and other diseases that are mediated by these protein-protein interactions. So it's a much more difficult drug to make. So it's one thing to go from just finding a peptide in the lab to making it something that can be injected, soluble in the human body, non-toxic, targeted to the right protein structures.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's what they're working on, is a new system to actually make peptide therapeutics and then make them stable and druggable in the human body.
Let's wander down the ethics and the philosophy of this and the biotechnology of this just a little bit more. What is going on with so many different ways to solve problems? We have so many different ways that we can solve these problems, and it seems like, let's take an example of the human body. I've talked about this before, and I've gotten answers from people before that say that there's no one, golden way to figure it out. And I wonder what your perspective is on it, because we have this human body, and so many people like Aubrey de Grey and June Yoon are focused on figuring out how to provide the option for people to live longer if they want, and to stay healthy longer. So as we figure out how to do that, could there be just one best way to figure out how to do that, versus, like you just described, that's only one of probably hundreds or thousands of ways that people are exploring how to live healthier. Yeah. Could there be that one best way to live healthier? And what would that be?
What would it be? If I had that question, I'd have the most miraculous infomercial in the world. It's a great question. There's a couple more nuanced questions that you can go down there. One is we're looking at lifespan, which is total number of years, versus health span. Is someone getting to 150, but they've eaten restricted calories every day of their life, been kind of unable to enjoy this amazing world we have, or does someone reach 80 at really phenomenal function for 99% of that time? I think two exceptionally different questions right now. And the longevity part of it, which is just getting more years behind that, I think is something that would take people doing a lifetime of research and not having a solid answer. It's a little bit, I think, beyond my knowledge. I think we've seen methods work in mice, in small C. elegans and other microorganisms, multicelled organisms, calorie restriction being a big one.
Yeah, it is. I'm actually fasting right now.
Nice.
I'm on my second day of a fast.
How long are you going?
Probably the full second day and maybe part of the third day. We'll figure it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think fasting is one of those really fascinating areas when it comes to when you're young, and then especially as you get older, keeping blood sugar in check. I think
Exactly.
people have interesting theories around it, purging precancerous cells, which we always have forming in our body.
Just cleanse in general.
So to speak.
Yeah.
Autophagy is
What's autophagy again?
Autophagy is basically cell death, inducing so when you have a trauma, like a cut or a big bruise, it's cell death that wasn't planned by the body, so to speak. But autophagy is cell death, cell clean out. So when you're restricting calories, cells they have time, and this is kind of what the theories of the mechanism are, actually clearing out debris and old proteins and recycling a lot to run much more efficiently, because they're not mired in the process of digestion. I think it's one of those that it's very difficult to have a randomized control trial that goes for the span of a human life, but people on the edge of performance and who have severe disease are experimenting with these things.
Yeah. So you think that there's a possibility, it's possible that there is something that could be that golden thing for us to tweak. We just need the little tweaks along the way.
Tweaking our pathways of DNA damage and DNA repair.
Yeah, exactly. So that might be the number one way, because that seems like what Aubrey's kind of
what a lot of these anti-aging researchers are looking at.
I think that might be the golden one. It might be, at least until we get to a point where we can do whatever you want with your consciousness and
uploading your brain wherever you want. Yeah,
exactly. So these little tweaks along the way, because you guys totally know you feel so much different when you're 13 and 18 than you do when you're at 40. You feel completely different. Your heart's beat so many more times, your back's been hurt so many more times. So So how can we do these tweaks along the way to live healthy, to feel like a 13 or an 18-year-old for as long as we want, and to not have our parents die of cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the future ethical conversations that we're going to have about genetic engineering, because I hope that at Indy Bio, from these high level conversations that you guys are having, there's at least some sort of a care or a desire to have the tougher conversations about what do we think about genetic engineering applied to exacerbating wealth inequality. It seems to be one of the top things that's been coming back to me, is that 8 people own as much wealth as 4 billion on the bottom side of things, and they're getting access to nanotech, gene engineering, neural laces, colonizing space. I mean, it's getting AI.
The gap is widening.
In many senses, but Steven Pinker just writes about how the bottom's coming up, which is great. You're right, but the bottom is coming up. But at the same time, they don't have the bottom 4 billion barely have access to a smartphone for now, let alone an AI that is running around and making people money or doing whatever. So how many conversations is Indy Bio having, and what are maybe your perspectives on what genetic engineering can do? Because of course it can genetic engineer away disease for people to eradicate suffering, which is amazing. We definitely want that. But then there's augmenting people's intelligence or metabolism, etc.
All these things. Yeah, it's really interesting because it's a conversation we have. It's certainly not something that is fundable or that we are funding. We're looking at eliminating disease, like the company I mentioned before. One mutation, one fix to get rid of severe suffering. When it comes to those much more gray lines, ethical questions, we debate, and like many people, there's no concise answer. Where does the line end between ending suffering and going into something that doesn't, is only given access to a small percentage? I think intelligence, we have some indicators of certain genes that will make people, perform better, be a little bit smarter, things like that. There's a huge cluster of interactions that we don't yet understand. But I think it's a very real question. How do we make sure that everyone gets access to these? Because we haven't solved so much around education, so much around health and access to good food, good water, these basic questions, but we're kind of jumping over them to get to something that's for just a small percentage of people.
Yeah, that's a crazy thought right there. That's a really important one to think about. The bottom 4 billion might not have access to clean water in some cases and clean food in some cases, shelter in some cases, the basic physiological needs, yet we're going already to, but that's also at the same time people talk about not wanting to impede the progress of capitalism and innovation. So
there's I would say the truth is always in the middle. There's no, I think there's no black and white here, because it's certainly not a bad thing to be pushing humanity forward, and this pushing might unlock fundamental technology that will maybe make access to water much easier, much cheaper.
Exactly.
So there's a balance. I think it's people keeping perspective and keeping focus on maybe multiple things at times. Bill Gates, for example, is a great example of someone who's doing a ton to alleviate suffering of the bottom 2 billion. Also looking at frontier technology. So people who have access to both are hopefully using the resources in a wise way.
It's a really good pull, As much as he's alleviating like polio and malaria, he's also working on AI technology. It's very interesting.
And one thing to kind of circle back to long before around giving tools to more and more people and more places, like when we have people who are building companies and creating technology, not just in Boston, San Francisco, London, these large hubs, Singapore, of biotech and tech innovation, but people who are in labs in Africa or in other places in Southeast Asia, or Latin America. We're seeing these people who are solving problems that are very relevant to them that they see that we don't, because we're here, we have access. They're seeing what's different in their world, and they're creating new solutions that being in the California, San Francisco bubble, we don't experience all the time. So we have to also think about how do we give resources and empower them. That's why, with Indy Bio, we don't just fund Bay Area companies or US based companies. Help people everywhere.
I mean, you're nailing it so well. When we were talking to Jordan Peterson about this, we were discussing the importance of potentially increasing creative output or increasing bottom line of companies by bringing in different people from around the world to actually have the conversations, because they're bringing in different perspectives from outside of the Bay Area or outside of the United States, and that's adding so much to innovation and creativity. In my opinion, we need to do, of course, more longitudinal studies about this and get some more literature on it, but it could potentially be very, very beneficial to have a woman sitting on the board of the company, because then she can provide a feminine, a diverse perspective, or somebody that's neurodiverse, or someone that's a person of color in the US, or maybe a US person in China or in Latin America, etc. So,
and I'll say,
go ahead.
Bring them here to give them tools and education and see what's available, but also it's important to venture out into the world and to go to these countries all over and see what is life like, what are the things we take for granted and have access to every day that maybe they don't, and how does that affect our decision making.
I'm optimistic about being able to figure it out together. I think there's this new era of humanity and awareness that's being ushered in slowly, and I think that optimistic feeling that I have about it is going to solve some of these big things that we think might be a problem in the future, such as wealth inequality. All right, so we hit some of the ethics of genetic engineering. I actually really wanted to talk about this with you for at least a little bit, because it seems like we're pretty close. What are the companies that you guys have funded that are working on growing organs and replacing organs in the body. Is it Organovo or no?
Is that one of our companies?
Yeah,
that is not.
That is not.
So
okay.
The whole stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine space is one we're super interested in and moving into more and more. Two that came through Indy Bio a little while ago that I think were really interesting. One is called Bioaesthetics.
Yeah.
They are actually for women who get mastectomies, where they have breast cancer and
That's right.
to get their breast cut off. They're actually regrowing the nipple areola complex,
Yes.
which we can't currently do.
That's so interesting. That's right. Remember that one.
That's
Bioaesthetics.
Bioaesthetics, yeah. So taking tissue from donors, cadavers, decellularizing it, so you just leave the collagen kind of scaffolding. Then when you put it on a patient, their own cells will migrate into the scaffold to make a native living tissue.
Yeah.
That's a very clever approach by them, because if you're looking at, we want to start with regrowing a kidney, for example, a much more complex structure. You also have to get it into the body as opposed to something outside. So there's a lot more time to market because of all the complexity of the biology. So a nipple is one very impactful, because there are patients, there's studies of it, people quality of life differences, people willing to get the life-saving procedure sometimes of a mastectomy,
Definitely.
the depression and other things that come with it.
Yeah.
So there's a huge impact in just this seemingly very small piece of the body. The other one that has two amazing founders, Melanie and Noel, is called Prellis Biologics. They're actually doing 3D bioprinting using lasers, which is a totally different approach, because everyone has talked about 3D printing organs for a while, but it's incredibly difficult to print those small structures, the very small microvasculature, the blood vessels right now. To get to that resolution, a normal 3D printer just can't go that small. They're actually using lasers, so where the two beams of light intersect, in a collagen bath, they're polymerizing collagen. It's actually making the structure that would be kind of what the cells of a lung, for example, are part of and rest on.
So they're using lasers in the collagen bath to organize the way that the organ is grown?
To organize the structure of the collagen structure, the kind of skeleton, in a manner of speaking, of an organ. And then there's cells that are seeding on top of that, the actual stem cells. So they're solving the problem of printing microvasculature. And
microvasculature.
So some of the proof of concepts which were really impressive. One, they printed a lymph node, which is part of our immune system, to make human antibodies, and they challenged it with Zika and saw Zika antibodies coming out. So showing it was actually functional. They also printed a blood vessel that they put red dye in, so the liquid, and saw that it actually contained the liquid without leaking, because that's showing that it's binding at a very cellular level to make functional cell walls, which is really important to eventually build an organ. So the end goal is being able to print kidneys, lungs, all these major organs that we need, but starting at a much smaller level to show proof of concept. And next up is attempting to do beta cells, which are the insulin-producing cells that diabetics don't have. And that, I think, their next milestone is putting them into a mouse to see if it's actually taking. The mouse is accepting the cells and then hopefully producing insulin with it.
Wow. Yeah. All the way from mastectomies and nipples to the laser printing of
organs.
Damn, that's super awesome. And such a vital part about where we're going. It's definitely another one of those parts of who can afford this technology.
And also, when going back to the longevity question you had before, oftentimes, when people die, it's one massive organ failure that leads to a systemic failure. So if you can get on top of that early and give people new, fresh, very capable organs, that could likely increase lifespan, I'd imagine. Especially when there's oftentimes no option or a long donor wait list that people have to go through.
The actual full scan of the body to be able to know what's going on with it is, I think we're not quite there yet to know every biometric, and when something's about to go wrong, to go in and prevent it from going wrong. That will be an interesting point in human biotechnology when we get there, just to be able to get a full readout of what's going on of you internally, that we obviously have no freaking idea.
No idea,
right now.
yeah.
Just like a little bit of pain here. Is it my kidney, or is it like my abs hurting from yesterday?
Is it a tumor? Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Being able to detect biomarkers. People are looking at how do you implant something that can be monitoring biomarkers all the time. It's a huge challenge. I haven't seen anyone that has made that happen. I think the intermediate from now until then is at least making blood testing much more democratized, much cheaper, and done much more frequently.
Exactly.
Right now, rather than once a year, maybe
every week. Some cool.
Yeah. If you have those companies
cheap enough and
working on single drop diagnostics.
Send it on in.
And that'll be a way to start getting on top of it early, and also seeing much more active trends in what's happening in your body, whether you're healthy or in response to drug therapy.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, both of those cases, and I totally would love that. Actually, it seems like proteomics is the more dynamic and shifting way to understand, like that single drop of blood, sending that off seems way more than the whole mapping of the genome. That doesn't change as much. Genomics don't change as much as proteomics are much more dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's happening? What is the difference between your skin and a kidney? That's expression of DNA into RNA and then proteins to build the structure. So each of these have different parts of your genetic code that are being activated to do different functions, create different structures, and make you function. Again, very dynamic. Looking at epigenetic changes, so how our environment, our lifespan is changing how DNA is expressed as well.
It's crazy how quickly cultural evolution changes compared to biological evolution. Just that is so fast changing in the way that it affects us versus the way that we biologically evolve.
How could we adapt to this environment? At the rate that it's changing. It's a huge question, I think. Our bodies haven't, on the health side, adapted to having sugar and food available all the time.
Oh yeah.
On the mental health side, a very different world where
addiction, bing, 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 bing.
Also, even how we live, whether we're in communities or alone, or in one apartment in a box full of 1,000 other boxes. Very different than 500 years ago, even. And in 100 years, it's hard to predict what we'll be doing.
Mega cities all filled with these little boxes. And one of my buddies is working on the eco village outside of Chicago. It's all sustainable. You're living out and about. You can go tune in when you want, tune back out into the metropolis. You know what I mean? It's good to have a little balance of that. Out in California, maybe we can have one of these little eco villages as well, so you can go there and come back into these boxed up condos. Yeah, you're right. All these different cultural evolutions, they're just so fast and they're changing so quickly. And how is this biological being adapting to those, the smaller spaces, the ding, 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 dings. And you bring up a good one, the sugar and the food, the constant. I always mention this to people, but and actually Nassim Taleb's been further pushing it through me as well, the Lindy effect, just how long things have been around. For example, like the wheel or the cup that holds water or liquid.
Interesting,
That is equivalent to the amount of life that it will have from this present moment on. So the wheel will be around a lot longer, and this cup will be around a lot longer, versus something like Snapchat that was invented a couple years ago might only be around for a couple more years. So things that have had a shorter lifespan will probably have a shorter lifespan in the future. Things that have a much longer lifespan will likely have a much longer lifespan. That I'm having so many more conversations about memetics rather than genetics. Interestingly enough, like if you can plant a seed in the minds of a couple million people or even 1 billion people around the world to care more about science and technology and the future of working together as a cohesive planet, we don't need to discover aliens to figure out we're all one tribe. We can figure that out together first. But if you can plant that idea, the whole cultural dissemination of that idea to people, that might be much more powerful than focusing on birthing a child into the world and focusing all of your attention on the child and trying to get the child. That's a crazy new thought, I think.
Very true. What is the impact of your life?
Yeah.
And when you expand the bubble for someone, can it ever shrink back to what it was before? So if you give these ideas around how much someone is capable of, whether it's through education, whether it's caring for others, acting altruistic, thinking beyond themselves, can they ever go back to their previous selves?
I don't think so.
It's a very interesting question, yeah.
I don't think so. And that's the expansion of the mind to new dimensions. I'm telling you, once I learned about this code of life and understanding it in that way, the A's, T's, C's, and G's, and being able to tweak it for all these different purposes, for the health and longevity, for our food systems, for all these crazy ways, my mind's never went back, ever. And that's only one of many of these interdisciplinary ways to understand our world. Again, remember that whole cosmic perspective and the whole molecular DNA perspective and the humans in the middle. Once you get that, again, you can't go back. So how do we plant these? Okay, let's venture into this question. How do we maximize human potential?
Ooh, that's an amazing question. It's fascinating. I think it's such an important question of our time when we look at how society is changing and the utility, quote unquote, of individuals. Our schools are built on a different society, a factory mentality, whereas now we get rid of a lot of the manual labor and we free up human creativity. I think it certainly starts young, giving kids more tools, more varied input, letting them kind of guide their own paths a bit. There's Khan School and these other experimental schools, I think, are really letting kids go into their passions and find passions more. And when you create kind of that, again, where you expand their bubble into that's something they want to do, that's how they live, it will probably just continue expanding. But that's here in a society that has access to food, water, a roof, energy. In other places, we have to give people all those foundational tools to have their needs taken care of and have their time taken care of to then focus on solving greater community problems, and from the community thinking outward and outward. I think people, when given the knowledge, the motivation, and the tools to do it, tend to focus on altruism. I think maybe it's my naive part of the view of the world,
right.
But I'd hope so.
Again, with Jordan, we were talking about people that become more competent typically want to help other people. The more competent you are, typically the more you understand that it's very important to help other people in the world. I like how you bring up education as kind of the fundamental understanding of maximizing potential. I completely agree with you. And there is this myriad of new ways that we are exploring how to educate young people into the world. I like to always bring it to the parent, the parent of the child, not as the only educator, but if you are birthing a child into this world, it is your responsibility to educate that child about the world that they live in.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, don't just drop off the kids and teachers and hope that it goes well. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And at that point, you'll end up becoming a better friend with that child as well. They'll treat you more like a mentor and a teacher as well as a parent, both.
I don't have kids, so I'm not speaking from experience. I would imagine also when you think
you have parents.
I do have parents. Yeah, good catch. When you look at mirror neurons, how when we see something we act on it and try and replicate it, especially at a young age where we don't have a lot of constraints and good and bad being taught. What we do, other people see and they do as well. That's why I think you mentioned before we're smiling more at people. Their mirror neurons turn on and those endorphins start flowing and they're in a better mood the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So you have impact by your actions, by your example, and how each moment is an opportunity to affect someone in a positive way or a negative way.
Yeah.
And that's something you have hundreds of thousands of chances every single day to steer yourself and someone else on a more positive course of action.
Exactly. Yep. So even down to the present moment level every single day. Just smileage, and steering people down better courses. So it's good. That's a really awesome answer for maximizing potential. How about, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the global ruling elite, do you think that one exists?
I can't say I've put a lot of time into worrying about it, because it feels a bit beyond my means to act. I tend to, again, this is based off of not much research or thought on the Illuminati or whatnot. I tend to not think about that. I think there are certainly circles of influence where, the people who are running, large companies, large parts of the world, there's who are they communicating with, who are they around.
Yeah.
So whether it's an organized or not organized circle, so to speak, ideas are coming from a certain subset of the population, which in a sense kind of creates that, maybe unintentionally.
Yeah. Maybe unintentionally.
We're putting this on the internet, so whatever we say is out there.
Maybe unintentionally. They definitely know you. That's a good way to put it. The circle of who's controlling the U.S. government, who's controlling Google, who's controlling China, who's controlling all these different entities, how they're communicating with one another to build the world. And I think they definitely know that they're influencing billions of people's lives.
It's hard not to at this point.
Yeah.
But there's the saying, you're the average of the peer group you surround yourself with. So these people are all creating massive gravitational pull towards ideas or ways of being.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so crucial. I'm glad you brought that up, because we got to surround ourselves with really smart people that are impacting the world, that are doing. Again, Nassim Taleb's planted skin in the game into my mind. Gotta surround yourself with doers, people that have actual skin in the game. He always talks about, I don't care what you say you have in your portfolio. I care about looking at your actual portfolio and seeing what you actually have. And that's the same thing with even the way that you could talk about wanting to change the world with biotech. I want to change it in this way, I want to change it that way. Yeah, but what 81 companies have you actually accelerated? So that kind of stuff. So doing is crucial in this process. Okay, let's do a couple of these last thoughts. Let's go with, do you think we're alone in the cosmos?
I really doubt it. Again, not a physicist, astronomer, or anything like that, but when you think of the vastness of our universe, it's hard for me to imagine that. And for us, we've expanded our sphere of the Earth is the center of the universe, the sun is, and now who knows? There's much beyond us.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. Ron Alex's answer, I doubt it.
That we're
I like how quick and powerful that was. Okay, and then, are we in a computer simulation?
So, I'm certainly not a programmer, an AI guy, VR guy. Those are fascinating areas, but the amount of time to have, I think, enough knowledge to have a strong opinion I don't feel like I have it. Again, I go back to almost in a sense not worrying about it, because it's something I can't control when it comes to that theory, and I feel, whether delusional or not, that I have control of my actions every day. So focusing on what am I doing now, how am I impacting the world and changing my behavior is much more important to me than theorizing on something that I don't know how we'd have any way of confirming, denying, or impacting that. So I'm gonna go with no, because I like to at least keep my illusion of some control on my life, whether or not I am completely delusional there.
I love your humility is so honorable. Just to preface every single one of these questions with hey, I'm not, I'm totally in biotech. I'm not a physicist. I'm not in all these spaces. But that's why there's
so much complexity out there.
There is.
To be a master of all is
very difficult.
Yeah.
And that's why having a lot of breadth, but not a lot of depth in all of those fields. That's why I try and understand biotechnology from at least the high level, 10,000 foot view, but I don't get any of the, RNA. Still don't know how to explain RNA, things like that. So
within biotech, I think or in health medicine science, there's the benchtop early research of the tools, the picks and shovels, the genomics. There's the clinical side, which is more where I come from, like how is this on a systems level affecting someone. There's a huge breadth even in biotech. Like there are very few people who are, I would say, close to masters of both even. So then to go venture beyond that is just another grand challenge.
And this is why we bring people onto the show that are very smart like yourself. You get to talk a lot about biotech and what the future of that looks like, and then we run you through a couple questions that are definitely in different fields of expertise, and we get to hear your perspective about those things as well. Because it's good to, like you said, it's good to know at least the vastness of the cosmos and understanding that, I doubt it. And then if we do doubt it, then the likelihood that there are other people, roaming around that have colonized their star systems and stuff like that are, could potentially have figured out how to simulate a universe. and it might be interesting to think about. So I like how you brought up that you're thinking about every single day how to become better yourself, because it's something that you can control, it's how to become better. So I like that. I like that focus. I think that's really crucial and important for other people to hear.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
Oh, good question. I'm going to go back. I think I'm thinking of the most beautiful place I've seen. I think, going back to that, I think probably the most beautiful place I've seen with my own eyes has been Costa Rica. I think of all the places I've traveled, seeing the jungle and how it merges right into the ocean is really inspiring. And again, connecting back to before, like society evolving faster than biology, that's, I think, for humans why we go on vacation to go camp in the middle of nowhere, away from all of our conveniences of modern life, because there's something just uniquely amazing and kind of fulfilling about being in those environments.
I love how you described the jungle ending at the ocean. I haven't been to a place like that. It sounds so amazing. I think the closest I've been to something like that is like Muir Woods and Stinson Beach. You got to drive a little bit.
We're pretty blessed in California.
Pretty blessed,
yeah, what we have.
But that crystal clear, like blue water, beach, and then just freaking massive trees, right, entering into jungle. All right, so that's pretty good. Maybe something that you're most interested in or looking forward to in biotechnology?
Ooh. I have like a couple different things running through my head. I think something I'm really excited about, tying in biotech and medicine, actually, which are very interrelated in many ways, is a switch of looking at most diseases as metabolic disease. I think it's something that gets talked about to some extent, but we don't fully understand the implications of that, whether it's things like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, which are very obvious tied to diet and lifestyle, to looking at people who have a lot of theories around Alzheimer's and cancer as driven by dysfunctional metabolism. I think when we start looking at that, we're going to start seeing how do we, for our whole life, all of our choices are acting and changing that. So whether it's things like the ketogenic diet to control diabetes, fasting for cancer, we're going to see more and more things around food as medicine. Because we're taking drugs, which are foreign substances, to influence some processes in our body. And food, if you think about it, foreign substance that is altering our metabolism, our hormones, our neurotransmitters.
Put it,
So I think that's a frontier of medicine that people are going to be looking at more and more.
So the metabolism, we use that as our ability to take in food, use that as energy and process to empower our body's heart to beat and brain to function, metabolism functioning. You described metabolism being a direct potential effector of things like cancer and Alzheimer's, heart disease. So you want to understand better how the metabolism relates to disease developing pathology. Yeah, so there are theories around Alzheimer's being essentially type 3 diabetes, where uncontrolled blood sugar is actually affecting how our neurons are working. Uncontrolled blood sugar causing Diabetes.
neuroinflammation.
Causing neuroinflammation. Huh.
And in cancer, a lot of, disbalances in, cancer, a lot of people have also talked about whether it's what are the main nutrients driving cancer, whether it's for certain conditions, fasting seems to be helping because you're taking away sugar as a fuel source.
Yeah.
And there's other specific amino acids that cancers might preferentially use. If certain pathways of creating energy are shut down, they switch to other pathways. So different, if you restrict certain amino acids, there are theories around being able to halt or be an adjuvant to chemotherapy to stop cancer growth.
Yeah.
So I think it's really seeing food as medicine and these nutrients and how efficiently our body is operating and the side effects of that.
And if you check out Alex's Instagram account, you'll see the way, we'll put the link in the bio, your plates that you design.
Those are totally jokes and trolls.
They are?
Completely.
100%?
Yes.
100%?
Yep.
I thought that you were
Those are my meals.
I thought you were actually eating just like a little bit of vegetable and a little bit of, I thought you were actually only eating that much food because you were calorically restricting yourself.
So I do have, not entirely, but mostly plant-based diet, really heavy on vegetables and fruit, with some meat, some other protein sources, seafood, eggs to some extent.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to calorie restriction, definitely looking at maybe fasting a couple days of the month. There was a period of time where intermittent fasting was a regular part of my routine.
Yeah.
I found that, especially when I was actually in grad school, worked really well with my schedule.
Yeah.
So,
only one meal at some point in the day.
Maybe 2 meals, something like that.
Yeah. Spaced like 6 hours apart or something.
Yeah. I think it's looking at having flexibility in diet to have enough breadth of knowledge and ways to live that you don't have to be stuck in obsessively eating, ketogenic, all fat, no sugar. At times, being able to go the other way. At times, fasting. At times, not. So
I know, man. You know me. I'm like cold turkey. Like I love that kind of stuff. But it becomes like Jun says. You need a bag of Doritos every once in a while, or a little French fries from McDonald's every once in a while. Yeah, exactly. To just push the weeble wobble in the different directions, z-axis as well, all of the freaking axes.
Well, we have a long life, so do you want a way of living that's sustainable for 80 years, or one that after a month you're snapping?
Yeah.
So looking at, I think these are very small cumulative actions. None of them are catastrophic. None of them are miraculous, so to speak.
So the thing that you're most looking forward to is better understanding food as medicine.
I think nutrition in general is an area, and integrating that and lifestyle into how we work with patients, how we educate people from a young age, how we create an environment that's going back to human flourishing. People are, in a healthy state, they're energized, they're inspired to do great work and help other people.
Yeah, hell yes. All about that. And this is why we're friends. This is why you come on our vodcast. This is why we talk about these things. Ron, what did you like most about the biotechnology and understanding the code of life?
He's stunned.
Oh, he's not on his headphones?
No, I hear you.
What do you think?
All of it. It was a wonderful conversation. Wrap it up.
We are right now.
Ron needs lunch.
We need
all this food talk.
All the food talk. He's like, Alan's fasting. No, it's okay. We'll get you some food.
That's right. Yeah. I don't care if you're fasting.
I'm not. So awesome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Simulation Series Vodcast with Alex Kopelyan. This has been an absolute blast.
Thank you, Alan.
Ventured down so many great conversations about biotech and the code of life and how it's impacting our future. We'll put your links. We already have the Indy bio link in the bio. We'll throw in your Twitter, Instagram, throw in a couple.
Both. I'm not a big social media guy.
So we'll put it to Indy bios then. Better?
Indy bio tags me and stuff, so that's why I'm still active on there.
So we'll throw some links in the bio. Check them out. And guys at home, if you guys had a good time, if you think this is useful for you in some way, give it a share with other people. like, comment, subscribe. We'll be producing more content soon. If you want to join in the conversation, become a patron. We have our Patreon link in the bio. We enable you to have conversations with our guests, to have priority in asking questions, priority in exclusive content, priority in live event information. So check us out on Patreon. Huge thanks to Ron Vargas behind their TriCaster, our director and producer, doing an amazing job. Huge thanks to Dulce and the River Studios family for hosting us at their venue. And all their links are in the bio as well. Thanks, Alex. It's been an absolute blast, and we'll catch you guys soon.
Cool. Thanks, Alan.
Woo.